Hey everybody, a new version of the Brain Trust we are rolling out on location in Durham at Tobacco Road, just outside the left center field fence of the Durham Bulls Athletic Park. They're going to try and clinch the South Division tonight again with another game against Gwinnett actually, but so fortunate to be joined here on the eve of football season by the three voices of our Triangle ACC teams, and they are ranked in order of seniority as you can see. We've got Gary Hahn, the voice of the Wolfpack of course in the red here, Jones Angel, voice of the Tar Heels in the middle, and then the new guy, David Shoemate, down on the end. And I guess we'll start off with the new guy. You guys want to haze him?
I was going to say, maybe we're actually ranked in quality as Gary, and then David and I are way over here tied, way behind Gary.
I'm just the old cooter.
So, David, let's start with you. Suddenly you're the voice of Duke Athletics. That's a pretty big deal.
Yeah, it's been a cool journey, and you say the voice. I mean, I've talked a lot and had a chance to have a couple meals with Bob, and I don't really think of myself as the voice. I think of Bob as the voice. I'm excited to pick up where he left off and pick up with the football and basketball games. But Bob's been great to me, and you do it for 41 years. You kind of cement the legacy, but it's cool to follow him.
I can obviously relate to what David is talking about with Woody doing it for so long, and still in my mind is the voice of the Tar Heels. But I think what David said is right. Is you want to continue kind of the legacy that the guy before you set, and I think Bob did the exact same thing Woody did, and it's that really high quality, the professionalism, the passion that he has for his team, and I know David will be able to handle all of that, but it's not that you're sitting in that person's chair. You're not taking that job. You're just the next person to do it, and so it's not easy. It's never easy, particularly at the beginning, but it will be a lot of fun.
Did Bob share any advice to you, and maybe you as well, Jones, taking over from Woody? Did they say anything to you about what you're talking about?
I mean, the advice Bob had for me, and I think it's exactly right, is don't come in and try to be me. Be you. Do your thing, and that's the thing. I'm not going to go into the chair and try to be the next coming of Bob Harris. I want to pick up where he left off and built on it. I do think we have some similarities stylistically. Bob was always, when you listen, on the edge of his seat. You kind of feel that coming through, and that's something I want to mirror. But yeah, that was the biggest piece of advice he had for me, was just be you and do you, and it'll go from there.
Woody, I remember, told me, Mark, it was the day that we were going to announce that I was going to have the job. And he told me, he said, I'm so proud of you. You've earned this. I'm really excited for you. And he said, I'm not going to tell you what to do. I'm not going to hang over you. He said, but if you ever need advice, I'm there for you. And to me, that was really impactful, because here's a guy that not only had I worked with for 6 years and learned from, but a guy I'd grown up listening to. And so when you hear that from him, it really impacted me in a positive way. And I remember after my first year, I gave Woody a CD kind of a basketball game and of a football game, and he listened to it. And I mean, and Gary knows this from knowing Woody, but I mean, detailed notes down to the second of on the broadcast of, this sounded really good, or you may want to try this, or I noticed you hadn't said this in a while, and that kind of stuff was really helpful. But he wasn't pushing that towards me. He waited for me to reach out and ask for that kind of help.
Do you remember, Gary? I mean, you've obviously been at State a while now. Do you remember first putting your feet down in that booth?
That was a lifetime ago. Because Wally Ausley retired, and Wally had been doing the games for many, many years. And I came in. I didn't feel the pressure that these guys are feeling, but Wally was very, very popular. And wasn't that Wally couldn't continue to do the games. I mean, he just got tired of it and wanted to retire and go to the beach. And that's exactly. And he became the mayor of Holden Beach.
Is that right?
Yeah, he became the mayor of Holden Beach until he died. And so there wasn't the same kind of pressure on me that there was on these two guys. But I do remember it, and I went into it the first year, trying to do my best and thinking, well, I wonder how long this is going to last. And some listeners started to come up to me, and they said, you know something? You sound like a young Wally. And I thought, man, that's the best thing you could have told me. That is the absolute best thing I could hear.
Yeah.
And when I heard that, I thought, I think things are going to be okay.
So did you have to wait a couple of years before you felt like you owned that job? Or did that?
I just decided that, the way David said it, I was just going to be me, and I would try to do the games like I'd been trained to do. And hopefully it was somewhat like Wally had done it. And if I was able to do it that way, I think everything would be okay. And that's just the way it worked out. But yeah, it took a few years for me to become really comfortable.
I'll say two things. One is, and I'm not just saying this because Gary is sitting here, But one thing that made it easier for me, and I'm sure David will experience this as he goes through the league, is a lot of the guys who had been at their places for a while, like Gary or Bob at the time, or Gene Deckerhoff down at Florida State, or whoever, Stan Cotton at Wake Forest, they were so welcoming because it is kind of these jobs don't turn over very often. You see these guys several times throughout the year. And
But the ACC's a family.
that's right. I agree with that. And so, I mean, obviously, I want Carolina to beat State and I want Carolina to beat Duke, but that doesn't mean I have any ill will towards either of these guys.
Yeah,
and so,
absolutely right.
that made it easier for me. And then also, you asked Gary, if it felt like it took a little bit of time. I do feel like you had to, at least I had to, kind of build up a little bit of equity with Carolina fans. I think they at least kind of recognized my name or knew me a little bit because I've been doing
beyond baseball.
Right,
Yeah.
and I've been doing our pregame, halftime, thank you, postgame. But for me, the Gio Bernard play against State that year in 2012 was the first time that there was a memorable play that people associated my voice with compared to Woody's voice. And so that was a big moment for me, for people starting to go, okay, now I understand kind of this is what's happening and who's doing this now. And that helped me take a step with our families.
Do you remember that play, Gary?
Yeah,
I didn't bring that up to rub salt in Gary's wound.
I
He could rub some in mine too.
I do remember that play because things kind of go through your mind when it happens, and when they lined up, I thought I'm not sure this is a good idea to try and punt to this guy, because that's just the way we always did things. I mean, we didn't punt away from people, so I knew the punt was going to go to him. And I thought, thinking to myself, I'm not sure, I don't think this is a good idea. But of course, you don't say that on the air. And then, of course, he catches it, and the rest is history. And I'm just thinking, why didn't we kick away from him? Just kick it to the other sideline as far away as you possibly can. But that's not the way, we did things that year. And so, yeah, I remember that play. That was very disappointing. But that's, so we win some, you lose some.
That's interesting that you say that you didn't say, I don't know if we should be punting
No,
to
because
Gio here.
that's not my style to second guess people. That's their livelihood to know what to do. Mm-hmm. And Tom O'Brien has won a lot of, he won a lot of football games, and he beat Carolina, I think, every year but that year.
That's right.
Yep.
So, who am I to second guess this guy, especially on the air? Now, I have my own personal opinion, it's going through my head.
Right.
But I'm not going to say that because that's not my place. My place is to describe, what's going on and to make a picture for a blind guy in a truck. That's basically who I'm talking to. I'm talking to a blind truck driver.
Dangerous.
Yeah, that's kind of dangerous, but no, I'm
Can you
talking.
tell us where this guy is so we can stay away?
I'm talking to a blind man who can't see
Sure.
the game, and that's what I try to do. I try to talk to that one person. I don't take for granted that he knows anything about State, even though I know that 97% of our listeners know quite a bit about the team. I still try to talk to the other 3% who might not know quite enough, and that's just kind of the way I do the game.
And I don't think that's just to that conversation, I don't think that's our role either. Whenever I speak to young journalists, and I'm sure these guys have done the same, to me, ESPN or whatever, a national broadcast kind of has to be right here as far as right down the middle, they got to be 50-50. And on the Tar Heel Sports Network, we don't want to be over here for the Tar Heels, but I do think it's okay for us to be kind of here. So, we're there for...
You have to be.
Right. We're there for Carolina. So I don't think it's not our role, at least I don't think so, to say, oh gosh, I can't believe he put that guy there, or I can't believe this happened. Now, if you're discussing strategy, and baseball is really heavy in this, where there's so many different strategical decisions to be made, I think that's okay. But I don't think you want to do, like Gary was saying, it's not his role as the voice of the Wolfpack to go, oh gosh, this seems like a terrible idea. That's not what you're doing.
Yeah, no, I would maybe not second guessing directly and bluntly
Right.
like that, but maybe a little bit of trepidation.
Right.
This is obviously a dangerous player
Sure.
back here. We'll see. But no, and how does that go to your relationship with your analyst? They would have a little more leeway in that regard in terms of their job description, no?
They have a little more leeway. I'll be working with Dave Harding, so he played
Yeah.
for Coach Cutcliffe, so he's got leeway. But at the same token, to Gary's point, we're there. We're speaking to Duke's fan base. We're not speaking to a national fan base, so
Yeah.
we're there to tell their story. And you get to talk to coaches. You get to talk to players after the game. You can ask them the question if you've got a feeling on that. Our job is to describe what happens and talk about going into these roles and the experiences you have. And I thought you said it great that our job is to be a journalist and tell what's going on and deliver, time and score and things like that, and to tell stories about these kids. And then, you know, I've had a lot of people ask me coming into this, do you have a signature call or something you're going to say over and over again? It's like, that's, to your point, that's a national guy. That's an ESPN thing. They got a shtick. They're working on their brand. And it's like, for us, to me, the exciting part is going out and just having the raw emotion come through, because that's what's so good about college. It's not, you know, self-promotional, maybe like the pros are, and people are trying to build their own brand. For college, it's about the uniform, and it's about the name on the front of the jersey. And it's for us to tell those stories and to bring it home to those people that are driving around or sitting at home and want to hear Duke slant, because they don't want to hear the ESPN version of the call, because half the time they don't know how to pronounce the kids' names or something like that.
So how do you guys how do you guys either embrace or reject the notion that everybody points you, not Carolina fans, not State fans, not Duke fans, but everybody else points to you guys as homers? That word, do you reject outright that word?
Yeah,
is that a chafing word?
I don't think I have ever said on the air during a State game, we.
Right.
I've either said the Wolfpack or State or the team, because I'm not suited up. And I never played at NC State. I only played half a season of freshman football, and I hated every minute of it. And you know, so that was in high school. You know, baseball was the only varsity sport that I played in high school. So I just don't, you know, I feel like I'm an extension of the team, but I am not a player, and I'm not a coach, and that's not my role.
It's a tough thing, because a lot of fans want you to be that way, do they not? They want you to have total ownership of the team, or how?
I don't know.
What's
What do
your
you guys think?
what's your
Because
impressions
I'm
of
not
that?
sure about that.
Yeah, I mean, I think, again, and I agree with Gary. I mean, if I have ever said we, it was a mistake if I did. Now, I think it's different if Eric Montrong's supposed to say we. He can say it all day
Yeah,
he
well,
wants
he
to.
was-
I mean,
he
you know,
was
Eric,
out there.
Yeah, he played, he won a championship, he's done all those things. So, yeah, I think I agree with Gary in that regard. And again, I'll kind of go back to my arm graph here. I do think that we can be on the network kind of right here. And we're there for Carolina. I mean, as Gary said, for his broadcast, it's 95% Wolfpack fans or whatever. And for us, it's that way with the Tar Heels. And so I do think they want a little bit of the Tar Heel slant, the Tar Heel flavor, that inside knowledge of the team. And, you know, all those things, the stories that you can tell just because you're around them so much. But every call that goes against Carolina isn't a bad call. Every 7-yard completion isn't the greatest 7-yard completion of all time. So I do think you have to kind of keep that balance between the pride for the school that you're representing, the athletic team that you're representing, and the professionalism of what you're doing on the air.
They have to know that you care, whether the Wolfpack wins or loses. But you can't be so over the top that you're turning people off.
Right.
And I think you can get to the point where you're so much of a homer that you're turning off your own fans, and you're turning off people that are tuning in to find out what you're doing, whether you're winning or losing.
Do you think that's evolved over the years? Because people, I mean, there's broadcasters who've been at it for years and years and years, and broadcasters who've been at it sub 10 years, and everybody has their own style and feel for that. Do you guys feel like there's a consensus amongst play-by-play guys, or do different guys see their job?
I think it's all over the place.
Yeah,
I would
my
think it's probably
experience,
different.
and I think we're all saying similar stuff of, you know, what is the definition of homer? Like, am I going to get more excited when Duke does something well? There's no question.
Sure.
But does that mean I'm going to be in the tank if the other team does something well? No, I'm going to present it as a journalist. But yeah, you're certainly going to have the slant of your team, but that doesn't mean, you know, someone's going to turn on the radio and not want to listen because you're in such a deep, dark place because the team's not playing well. No, you still have a job to do for the rest of the game. But I do think if someone turns on the radio and is listening to Duke and listening to me, they should probably have a pretty good idea if we're playing well and we're winning the game by the way that I'm calling the play. So I do think it tilts that way a little bit.
You got to have the personality to do that too. I'm in broadcasting because of two guys, Bob Prince and Jim Woods. When I was a little shaver, they were the voices of the Pittsburgh Pirates, and I grew up in Western Pennsylvania, at least the first 11 years of my life. And these guys, Prince was a wild man, Woods was a straight man, and they had so much fun on the air that's the reason why I want to get into broadcasting. Right. I thought no job has this much fun. But Bob Prince was a unique personality. And he was in a position in an area where they embraced that sort of homerism. And Bob Prince had a personality that I can never match. I mean, he was just crazy. But he was accurate, and you've got to go to your strengths.
And it was genuine.
It was all genuine. But I'm I don't have that kind of personality, so I don't think I can make that go.
You know, Gary.
That's what I'm trying to say.
Yeah, you can't be a character.
No, I
You
can't.
have to
And
be
I'm
who
not
you are.
I'm not a character.
Yeah.
I'm just who I am.
I think something Gary said also is unique about this area is that while in my opinion Carolina is the biggest team in the area, and I'm sure Gary feels differently and David does, but this is not a one team area
right.
at all. I mean, as we all know, I mean the allegiances are split sometimes down to in households around here, and so I do think this is a unique area in that way, in that it's not just the Pirates, for example, or just
Right.
the Penguins or the Steelers or whatever in Western Pennsylvania. There's so many different people, not just Carolina, Duke, and State. I mean, there's Charlotte and ECU and Elon and I mean Wake Forest, and you can go on down the road. So I do think it's a little different here in that way too.
I'll put you on the spot, David. What do you think got you the job?
I don't know if I'm the right person to answer that question. But, I think first and foremost, you know, you can talk about who you know and you can talk about how the interview process goes. Your tape has to sound good. That's what's going to get you first and foremost. So I think my experience calling games across the country and working at different schools, and then I think it probably helped that I filled in last year and the coaches were able to meet me and get to know me and see how I worked, and that there's just a sense of comfort of that, of guys, and you were around the program before
Right.
you got the job. That certainly doesn't hurt. I don't know if that's definitive because your tape is what ultimately gets you the job, but if I talked to those guys, I would guess it would be somewhere in that vein.
Gotcha. Take us inside what summertime is for a play-by-play guy of the big sports.
A lot of home projects. At least it is for me anyway, because if I don't get them done during the summer, there's another year going by that they're not going to get done.
So,
You know, for me, I've got two small, I've got a 9-year-old daughter and a 5.5-year-old son. And so, once we kind of get through what is our Rams Club tour and, kind of that takes us through the end of May when all that is done, June and July are by far lighter than the other 10 months of the year. That just makes sense. And so for me, it's nice because I am able to stay at home a little bit more and spend some time with them because, these guys know this. You miss Thanksgiving a ton. You may miss Christmas because of a bowl trip. And those things are not easy when you're explaining that. It's one thing to explain it to your wife or to your family or to your friends, but when you're explaining it to a 5-year-old, it's a little different. And so to be able to be home a little bit more is nice. My personal situation is unique in that I am involved with or employed by UNC. So I do have a 9-to-5 kind of job where I am there. But there's much more flexibility, certainly, in those months compared to the others.
and then the workload once you're in season.
Yeah, November is tough. November and March for me are the two hardest months. November with the crossover, and then March with just so much basketball going on and being on the road so much.
ACC tournament.
Yeah, it's tough.
Yeah.
We do. I think Jones still does it. We do it. I call 8 to 9 games myself at the ACC tournament. That's a lot of talking.
It's a lot of games.
That's a lot of talking.
So what is the inherent joy that keeps you coming back every year?
For me, it's trying to do the perfect broadcast. I haven't been able to do that yet. There's always something I should have said or didn't say, or Plus, I've always loved sports. I love the Wolfpack. Love being here. This is the greatest opportunity that I've ever had, and I can say that. I was at Ohio State. I was at Louisville. I worked for the old NBC radio network in New York, and this is still the best place I could be. God opened a tremendous door for me to be here. I'm thankful. North Carolina's my home, and I love it here.
For me, Mark, it is the combination, and it's a rarity, of getting to do what you want to do at a place that you want to do it. And so, I knew for a long time that I was interested in doing radio. It's something I thought I would be good at, and something that I wanted to do. Never did I think that, I hoped Carolina would be a place that I could possibly do it. It was never the thought of Carolina or bust, or that was the only thing that could happen. But to get that chance to do it at a place where I went to school, or my parents went to school, or my wife went to school, or my sister went to school, my brother-in-law went to school. A place where I grew up rooting for. So getting to have that combination of things is wonderful for me. So it's really a daily thing for me, for sure.
And I got into this because, like broadcasting, obviously, but also like journalism and telling stories. And you talk about doing it year after year. To me, each year is entirely different. Like this is an exciting time of year to be on campus, and you're starting to learn the kids and their personalities and the team and the way it takes shape. So to me, every year is entirely different, and that's what makes it exciting. Yes, the logos are the same, and it's still football and basketball, but entirely different personalities, and you get to see those kids and get to see them work their way through the system, and that's what's really fun for me.
I agree 100% in that. I think one of the neat things about what we get to do is that it's never the same. Now, your preparation is the same. You know, you build that system of being ready for a game, and you have your stuff in front of you and all those kind of things. But the teams are different, the games are different, the years are different, the situations are different. I mean, every time it's different, and that's fun, I think, to kind of keep you on your toes a little bit.
You sound like Coach K. Coach K is big on saying every journey.
That may be the first time anybody's ever
Right.
put me and Coach
That's
K
why I
in the
waited
same
for you to
sentence.
say it. I could have said it after David there. That would have been too smooth. So let's skip over to talking football. The rest of us who are fans, I mean, I'm a fan of a team way out west, but we're all excited for the start of football season. Is the feeling you guys have as football season comes up close like it is now the same, you think, as one of the fans who's going to be listening to you?
Well, for me, I start getting excited about 2 weeks out from the first game. Now, I start attending practice, but I'm hanging on to every day of summer I can. And then it starts to get a little closer and a little closer and a little closer, and I know the players better. I know the two deep better, and then I start getting excited. But yeah, I'm excited about this team, especially this year. I think the Wolfpack can do some special things.
Yeah.
I do think for me it's a combination of excitement because it's an exciting time. I mean, you've been without athletics for a while now, at least in this area, or college athletics for a while now, and so that part of just having it come back up. But it's also a little bit of a daunting time of year because you're trying to make sure that you have everything taken care of with the broadcast, and that's not just the play-by-play responsibilities necessarily. It's just making sure that all those things, all those boxes are checked, that you're as ready as you can be from the time you go on the air all the way till we're done with post-game. So kind of making sure all those things are taken care of is a little stressful too. But once you get through the beginning, a lot of times that part eases up.
Sure. David, tell me reasons, we'll get into the football now. Tell me reasons outside of Daniel Jones, who's maybe the obvious one, why this should be an exciting Duke football season.
Well, you mentioned Jones. The quarterback got a lot of attention because of the Coastal, just the problems at quarterback up and down the rest of the division. But when you look at what they bring to the table, a lot of experience up front, a lot of juniors and seniors along the offensive line, and then you've got 8 of the top 10 receivers coming back from last year, and Sean Wilson coming back as a senior running back. I mean, there's a lot of optimism on the offensive side of the football. They're going to be fun to watch. I know they weren't happy with the point production last year, and that should be something that should jump up pretty well. Guys, stay healthy.
Cut says a lot of big things about Daniel. I mean, I would imagine as a coach, you don't say those things unless you believe the player can kind of live inside that hype and live up to the hype.
You don't, and you don't take it lightly when it's Coach Cut. When you think about guys he's brought along, Peyton Manning obviously jumps out, and when you see him in practice at 6'5" and his presence, and he's a quiet guy, a very humble guy, which is unique for the amount of talent that he brings to the field. But I was struck at media days when Coach Cut said, essentially, be careful when you say he's quiet, because a quiet confidence can sometimes be the most lethal. And I'm interested to see what he can bring this year, because he's had a really good camp, and you can see the progression year 1 to year 2 pretty obviously.
Good young linebackers, I know you guys have too, but the defensive front, the defensive backfield, can they be better than they were last year? They kind of need to be.
That's the question mark, right? I mean, some young guys in the secondary, but they're very, very talented, and they've talked pretty openly about how in camp they've done better with forcing turnovers and come up with those big plays, because that was the missing piece last year. They played okay, but never really got the big play to get off the field, and that's something to go along. And you talked about the defensive front and Ben Albert in his second season coming along, managing those guys. I want to speak for the coaches, but as you watch camp, that might be the group that's made the most progress or come the furthest along with what they've done up inside. And the biggest difference this year, and Coach Cutt has talked about this some, is that in years past, Duke has had talent, but been very susceptible to when guys get injured, how deep is that? And that's been the most exciting part about this camp and this year. Yes, they're young, but they're young 2 and 3 deep, and they feel like guys can go out there and play. And that's going to be interesting to see how that evolves throughout the year. So I wouldn't be surprised to see guys rotating in throughout the season.
And you promised the 3 of us that you'd unveil the starting kicker.
I'm going to leave that to Mr. Cutcliffe.
Well, in a similar vein, Jones, just cut to the chase. Who's the quarterback?
Oh,
man?
yeah, man. Let me just make that announcement right now. I do think it's been an interesting camp for Carolina. I think this is the most uncertain that Carolina has been going into a year since Larry Fedora has been the head coach. And I've had a chance to talk to him a couple times here recently, and he said he has never faced a challenge like this offensively in his career, and by that he means just the amount of production lost from the previous year. So I mean, you're talking the starting quarterback, who obviously was the number 2 pick in the draft, top 3 rushers, top 3 receivers, and 3 starters on the offensive line. That's a big deal. And so it's almost 90% of the total offense is lost. And so that is a daunting task, I think. And so it's been an important camp for them just to A, try to identify who's going to do it, and then B, identify what can they do with that personnel, because it doesn't make sense to try to do something that Mitch Trubisky could do if whoever the quarterback this year can't do it. And so I think trying to figure that out has been a big part of it.
What do you make of the fact I've been reading that the offense kind of took its lumps in training camp effectively from the defense?
Oh, I don't think there's any question. And some of that I think is to be expected. This is for Carolina a pretty veteran defensive unit, and even though the coordinator has changed, the terminology, the scheme is not different just because John Papuchis is now the coordinator. So I think when you add in the experience along with they've been in this system now for a couple of years, and the youth on the offense, it's not a big surprise. And there's no doubt the first 75-80% of this camp was dominated by Carolina's defense. I do think these last couple of practices, the last scrimmage, you started seeing a little more life from the offense. You started seeing some steps being taken, and certainly that will have to continue as the year goes on.
And I guess it's the exact opposite. You guys are sitting pretty all on
Yeah,
intents and purposes.
there's a lot of excitement, and I think it's warranted. And I think there are a couple of reasons for that. Number one, you got a team that was probably a handful of plays away from probably a 10-win season last year, easy. And then you take a look at both sides of the ball, and you've got 16 starters back. All 8 starters on defense are seniors. State, I'll go out on a limb and say it, I think is going to have one of the best defensive lines, not only in the ACC, but in college football. I think no matter what Florida State puts out there, no matter what Clemson puts out there, some of the other, really good teams in the league, I think State can match that on the defensive line. So this defense is going to be good. Obviously, there's some weapons on offense too, a lot of them. I think the wide receiver core is probably the best that Dave Doran's had since he's been here. I think that Ray Charles could see that this man's been building a program, and now he's seeing the fruit of all of those labors. So this is plus and just watching these guys in preseason, they seem to be very, very together. He's always preaching hard, tough together. Well, he's got that kind of team, and I think that's really exciting.
How massive is the first game?
It's pretty big because you go back to last year and State had its opportunities to beat some of the big boys and couldn't get it done. Well, now you've got, you beat a SEC team pretty well in the bowl game. Now you start out with another SEC team that is kind of a sleeper as well. Has a very good offense, some issues on defense, but you've still got SEC caliber players. And I think for State to win that game, it would tell these guys something that they need to know, that they're as good as anybody that they can line up against. And I think that's basically it in a nutshell.
Man, we'll wrap this up. I don't know if I'm putting you on the spot with this question, but how would you, and we'll start down at your end there, David, how would you define a successful season for the Blue Devils this year? What has to be accomplished?
I think they want to be back in a bowl game. I mean, you look for the last 5 years, they've been in one, weren't in one last year, and Cutcliffe talked at the end of the season about coming into the office after the 4-8 year and really having nothing to do. And he talked about that early on in camp and saying, I don't want that feeling again. And that has kind of been the mantra through the entire offseason. So I think being back in a bowl game and who knows from there when you've got a quarterback like Daniel Jones, what he can do for you when there are a lot of question marks in the division on the offensive side of the football at the quarterback position.
I think for Carolina, and I don't think this changes in a year, I think it's to be competing for the division championship. And the Coastal is unique in that way, in that there has been a lot of turnover. It's almost a different team every single year. But I think Carolina, a realistic expectation, not just this year, but every year, should be that they can win the Coastal Division and play for the ACC championship. And so there's certainly a lot of question marks, and that's easier for me to say sitting here in late August than it will be to achieve on the field. But I think for Larry Fedora and the point where he is in his career at Carolina, he feels like they should be competing for that division title every single year, because then when you do that, you have a chance to do even bigger things.
Personally, for me, if you can have a winning season and go to a bowl, I consider that pretty good. But this year, I think State's got to step up one notch. They've got to, as Jones said, they've got to compete for the conference championship. You've got to show that you're a contender. And if they can do that, I think this will be a really good season.
You got to take out one of those big three on top of the Atlantic.
Well, you got to do something, and you know when you got to go through Florida State, Clemson, and Louisville every year, you know you're going to have to bump off of probably at least two of them to have a shot at that. So that's that's a tall order, but who knows? I like this team, and we'll see what happens.
No easy feat, guys. My hair still stands up when I hear the pregame cannons and stuff. Do you get all that way too when the team comes charging out, regardless of what team it is? I mean, that pregame still gets me. However many years.
If you're prepared, you're excited.
I tell you one thing that's always fun for me is the national anthem. I just think that when you're at a big game and you're right there on the cusp of a tip-off or a kickoff or whatever it is, and we're all lucky that we cover teams that play in big games and important games and that people care about. That to me is like that last little calm before the storm, and for me that's always a lot of fun.
Yeah, there's nothing better than watching the team run out on the field. I mean, I think that's always the highlight for me, and it's kind of brings home, all right, let's go. We've been talking for hours about the game. We've been talking all week about the game. Let's play some football.
Good. All right, so let's play some football, guys. Gary, thank you for joining me. Jones and David, the new guy at the end. Football just around the corner. Thanks for watching The Brain Trust.